On July 11th, the biggest star in MMA history returns to the octagon on an absolutely stacked UFC 329 card. And so I'm super excited for this video. Going to be going through my full card predictions, breaking down every single matchup, giving my winner pick, letting you guys know how I think they get it done. Main card and the prelims. They're going to be timestamps in the description if you guys want to jump around to certain matchups. But honestly, top to bottom, just a really strong card. The main is stacked. The prelims have some fun fights littered with prospects. I mean, you've got Ethyn Ewing taking on Farid Basharat on the early prelims. Like, that is crazy. So I'm super excited to jump into it. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, subscribe, drop your picks in the comments. But we are going to start off all the way down at flyweight with Cody Durden taking on Alessandro Costa. And Cody Durden's coming off a pretty solid win. He was a massive underdog against Jafel Filio. I think he was like a plus 475. Ends up coming up with a pretty solid decision win. And it was a win he kind of needed. Cody Durden kind of settled into this range where he was going to stay in the UFC just based on his activity and taking kind of tough, short notice fights. He was riding a 4-fight losing streak going into that matchup. And so that was a really big one for him to pick up. He's a tough dude. He has a really high motor. He's going to go out there, try to push a pace. He's typically someone who looks pretty good and competitive early on in fights. It's just he's at an athleticism and kind of durability disadvantage against most of his opponents and against some of the better flyweights in the world. And he just doesn't quite have that same finishing upside. So he has been finished in 7 of his 9 losses. And then he is someone who's a pretty high volume wrestler, averages 4 takedowns per 15 minutes, lands those takedowns at a 49% clip. He was originally scheduled to take on Ode Osborne, which was kind of a different test. I think it was honestly an easier matchup than his new opponent, which is Alessandro Costa, who is a 4-3 UFC record, so it doesn't look great, but he's just super dangerous. 4 of his wins, or all 4 of his UFC wins, have come by knockout. In terms of his pro wins, he has finished 13 of 16, 7 by knockout, 6 by submission. He already has 2 KO wins in 2026. And he is just super explosive. He's going to come out. He's going to wing big shots, has really solid leg kicks. And then his losses have just come against pretty good competition. Amir Albazi, Steve Erceg, and then Alden Correa. Correa, not as well known, but someone who I do think is rising up the flyweight rankings. And so I think this is just a pretty tough matchup for Durden. I don't see him coming out and just completely ragdolling Costa. And I think he's going to have some problems on the feet just with the power edge that Costa has. So I'm going to take Costa to win this one by round 2 knockout. Next up at middleweight, we have Ryan Gandra taking on Zach Reese. The UFC honestly kind of seems high on both of these dudes. They both got like the Jose Medina layup matchup, who probably one of the worst fighters to ever fight in the UFC. But that was Gandra's UFC debut, 41-second knockout win in that one. That is now 3 straight knockout wins for Gandra. He is very aggressive. He is going to throw big punches in combination, has some solid kicks. His style is not super efficient, and so if you can, push him deeper into matchups, I do think he could have some issues. Throughout his career, though, so far, he hasn't really been forced to fight late in many of those matchups. On the other side with Zachary Reese, he's kind of just fine. Like, he has a 4-3 UFC record coming into this one. His last fight was a very close split decision loss against Michel Pereira. Now, his strength of schedule has been pretty poor. He has faced some pretty low-level UFC fighters throughout his UFC career. But he's just like decently well-rounded. He's all right everywhere. He's got a solid frame, 6'4", 77-inch reach. Like, the striking's all right. He's capable as a grappler. Does have a lot of UFC level experience, even though it's kind of like bottom of the barrel. UFC comp. He only has 14 pro fights, but 8 of them have taken place in the UFC. So I do think if this one goes long, it could swing towards Zachary Reese, but I just think Gandra has that danger factor on the feet to get this one done early. So I'm going to take Gandra by round 1 knockout. Now, this is honestly one of the fights that I am most excited for, and it's kind of buried on the early prelims. This fight should be way higher. Maybe they reshuffle it. We'll see. But Farid Basharat taking on Ethyn Ewing. Basharat, almost feels like the B side in this matchup because Ethyn Ewing has so much hype. But the dude's undefeated, 15-0, 6-0 in the UFC. He is a ranked bantamweight, which is a real accomplishment with how stacked this division is in the UFC. He's coming off a very close split decision win against Jean Matsumoto, who is pretty legit. We just saw him pick up a win against Beksat, and Matsumoto's honestly always a guy who's just going to fight you pretty close. He's pretty tough to outclass. Was a matchup that could have, swung either way. I think Basharat is very well-rounded. He's got some really solid striking, some nice straight punches, mixes in the kicks, knees, elbows pretty well. I don't think he has a ton of danger factor there. Like, he doesn't hit super hard, but he's totally solid technically. And then he's a pretty efficient grappler, averages 3.34 takedowns per 15 minutes, lands those takedowns at a 44% clip, and then solid control time when he can get you down. He hasn't shown much finishing upside in the UFC, only one finish, and that was against Clayton Rodriguez, who I think was finished in every single one of his UFC losses and did not have a great stint in the promotion. And then, like I said, not a ton of danger factor on the feet, 0 knockdowns so far in the UFC. Ethyn Ewing is coming into this one with a lot of hype, and I think it's pretty warranted. I think he is a true top-tier prospect in the UFC. He debuted on short notice against, at the time, very highly respected Malcolm Wellmaker, who is undefeated at 10-0. And also just like stylistically, Ethyn Ewing's a striker, having to take that fight on 2 days' notice, the power of Wellmaker on the feet, that was a really tough test. And he comes out with a pretty impressive decision win. But then I think the even more impressive performance came in his last time out against 14-0 Rafael Estevam. This is now 3 straight undefeated opponents to start his UFC career. But Estevam was moving up from 125. He posed a completely different, test in this one. He was a very dominant control grappler at flyweight. And man, Ethyn Ewing just put together a masterclass. Outlanded him 114-44 in significant strikes, ended up finishing him in the 3rd round with a nasty body shot. And then his takedown defense was on point, defended all 8 takedowns that Estevam attempted in that matchup. His boxing is so elite. I think probably his best trait, well, I don't know. He's got a couple of pretty awesome traits. I was going to say he just stays so balanced. He's never overextending. Even when he has his opponent hurt, he's not overthrowing. He's never really putting himself in a bad position. The reason why I almost, hesitated at calling that his best trait was because his shot selection is also just so impressive. Feels like he always knows, what the right thing to throw is. He does a really good job varying his timing. He doesn't have specific movement patterns that you can really lock in on. He's very defensively responsible. Part of that is how balanced he is, in his stand-up. He's got really nasty body shots, and then he doesn't throw a high volume of kicks, but he is pretty opportunistic with them. Had a couple of nice kick knockouts, I think head kick knockouts pre-UFC on the regional scene. And then so far in the UFC, the takedown defense has been on point, stuffed all 11 takedown attempts that his 2 opponents have attempted on him. And so I think Farid's really good. I think he is a legit top 15 guy here at bantamweight. But when I look at Farid, I think he's someone who's going to be in that 10 to 15 range. Whereas with Ethyn Ewing, I think he has true championship upside. And so probably a tougher grappling test in this one for Ewing than against Estevam. But man, he just passed that last test with flying colors. I think this is a pretty decent matchup for him. I think he's going to be able to stuff the takedowns. I think he's going to get rolling on the feet. I think we're going to see another very impressive Ethyn Ewing performance. As you can probably tell, I'm super high on him. I think we could see another late finish. So I'm going to go Ethyn Ewing round 3 knockout in this one. Farid, very good. I don't think he's exceptional anywhere. I think Ethyn Ewing is an exceptional striker. So he's the guy I'm going to be rolling with in this matchup. Now, jumping up to middleweight, we have Damian Pinas taking on Cesar Almeida. A very clear striker versus striker matchup here. Pinas is a really fun prospect. He is only 24 years old. He is 9-1. That one loss was like a DQ on an illegal kick from him, so not even really him getting like outclassed or anything. He has an 100% finish rate. 8 of those wins by knockout, 1 submission win. He had a round 1 knockout on the Contender Series and in his UFC debut. And this dude just hits very, very hard. He is very powerful, has a stiff jab. The straight right hand is nasty. Like just a 1-2, very basic, sequence of punches, but it is devastating when he throws it. It helps that he's got a crazy reach, 79.5 inches. And I think he's only 6'1". Not that that's like super short for this weight class, but he's got like some go-go gadget arms here in terms of his wingspan. He's still pretty untested as a grappler, but that's not something he's going to have to worry about here against Almeida. Almeida is a former very high-level kickboxer who's transitioned to MMA. He has gone 3-2 in the UFC, coming off a pretty rough performance against Cesar where he was just control grappled for pretty much like the entire fight. And he has really struggled with the grappling. He's been taken down 17 times in 5 UFC fights. I think it's more likely that Pinas goes to the wrestling than Almeida, but I also think both of these guys could just be content to stand in this one. We have seen Almeida get dropped a couple of times in the UFC with the straight punch, and that could kind of be concerning here against Pinas, who does hit very hard and is just so quick, with that 1-2. Now, obviously, Almeida's a very dangerous striker, has pop in his hands, has won 5 of his 7 pro wins by knockout. I just think Almeida's the younger, fresher guy here. I think he's going to be more durable. I think he's going to have the speed advantage. I'm going to go Damian Pinas, round 1 knockout. And I think he gets it done with the 1-2, maybe feints the jab, just comes, straight down the middle with the straight. But I think Pinas wins this one by KO. Now, I believe this is the only women's fight on the card, and it's honestly a pretty solid one. At flyweight, we have Tracy Cortez taking on Wang Tong. Cortez is 6-2 in the UFC. It does kind of seem like she's hit a wall against some of the better competition. Like, she does have some decent wins. The Jasmine Jasdavicius win has aged pretty well. Beat Viviane Araujo, but, lost 2 of her last 3. Decision against Rose, which was pretty uncompetitive. And honestly, Rose hasn't even looked all that great up at 125. And then her last time out was submitted by Erin Blanchfield. Just really dominated in the grappling in that second round. I think Cortez is fairly well-rounded. She definitely wants to get her wrestling going, averages 2.15 takedowns per 15 minutes, lands those takedowns at a 46% clip. And then on the feet, she's got some decent boxing. She's nothing crazy, but she's just totally solid everywhere. I do think she's pretty physically limited for this weight class. She has 0 finishes in the UFC and 0 knockdowns. And so she is kind of just locked into having to win a decision, which you don't love to see that. On the other side here with Wang Tong, she's pretty dangerous, and she's a really fun, I think she's in her 30s, so I don't know if we're saying prospect, but I do think she's someone that could continue to rise up the rankings here. She's 4-1 in the UFC, riding a 3-fight win streak. She's a very impressive striker, has legit pop in her hands, like real power at women's flyweight. She's landed knockdowns in 3 of her 4 wins. She works all 3 levels on the feet, has some really nasty leg kicks, so just can really break you down throughout the course of a fight. She's pretty high volume, 6.22 significant strikes per minute, only absorbs 2.19 per minute. So very often just racking up way more volume than her opponents. Now, the big question mark with her game and also in this matchup is just the grappling. Her 1 pro loss was a club and sub. And so I'm not really using that to say she has terrible submission defense because she had just gotten dropped. So acceptable. But her last fight out, she picked up the win against Eduarda Mora, but she was taken down 3 times and controlled for 8 minutes. And so I think the big question here is just, can Tracy Cortez rack up just these rounds of control time? And I'm leaning towards no. I think Cortez is going to be able to take Tong down a few times in this matchup, but I think Wang Tong can do enough work on the feet where Tracy's just not super active, doesn't have crazy ground and pound. Like, I think even in rounds where Wang Tong gets taken down, I think she can still edge them out with her work on the feet. I don't know if she's going to have enough time in the striking to find the finish and like really break Cortez down, but I'm going to take Wang Tong to win this one by decision. Next up at 145, we have Kai Kamaka taking on Luke Riley. Kai Kamaka had kind of mixed results in his first UFC stint, went 1-2-1. I believe he was released or, just didn't get his contract renewed in 2021. Outside the UFC, he went 9-3. Actually, all three of those losses were by split decision. So all very competitive matchups, even the ones he was losing. He fought in Bellator, PFL, most recently in Tough Enough. And then he returned to the UFC earlier this year, had an absolute scrap against Dakota Hope, a fight he won by split decision. And Kai Kamaka is just a fun dude to watch. He's a high-volume striker, mixes up his targets very well, pretty durable, lands 5.4 significant strikes per minute. On the other hand, he does absorb more significant strikes than that, 5.67 per minute. So he does kind of struggle to fully outclass his opponents and can be a little bit hittable. He's shown kind of a minimal grappling threat so far in the UFC. I believe he landed 5 takedowns in his debut, but his last 4 UFC fights, he has only landed 2 total takedowns. And then just really limited finishing upside. This is honestly kind of crazy to see. 4 finishes in 18 pro wins. Typically, guys are at least able to kind of stat pad early on in their career. Really just never been a finisher with Kai Kamaka. Now, on the other side here, I think the UFC kind of knows what they're doing with Luke Riley. He's a part of that Patty team. He's got a fun style. They think he's marketable. They want to push him. So he's 2-0 so far in the UFC. Had the knockout win in his debut against Bogdan Grad, and then a decision win last time out against Michael Aswell. He's undefeated at 13-0. 9 of those wins have come by knockout. He's a pretty solid striker. He's got some good boxing, works the body well, can be dangerous in the clinch, knees and elbows. I do think his defense is a little bit sketchy. We did see Michael Aswell have some success in the pocket. I think especially if you can make Luke Riley miss with like his first shot, he can kind of get out of whack and the defense does become a little bit sus. And then I think the grappling is just a big hole. Like I think the UFC are going to continue to give him strikers for a while now. Like I don't know why they would switch that up. And so can Kai Kamaka come in and test the grappling? I do think he needs to make this fight dirty, put the pressure on Luke Riley, but I do think Riley's probably going to get this one done. I will say, I think the odds are a little bit extreme in the favor of Luke Riley. I don't think he's maybe as good as the odds would suggest, but I'll still take Luke Riley to win this one. I think he'll get it done by decision. Now, dropping one weight class down to bantamweight, we have Cody Garbrandt taking on Adrian Yanez. And man, like the fall off of Cody Garbrandt is just very strange. Typically when you have someone who becomes the champion and they have some sort of fall off, it could be like durability related. They could just be getting old and like the reaction time isn't really the same. For Cody Garbrandt, it just feels like, what is it, the Monstars, where they just can like zap your power or like zap your skills. It kind of feels like that's what's happened with Cody Garbrandt. And I can't remember the time where you had a former champion, right, who was at the peak, has that awesome win against Dominic Cruz, and then into like their early to mid 30s, they're just like fighting random dudes on the prelims. Adrian Yanez isn't a random dude. That wasn't meant to be a stray at him, but like coming off a decision win against Zhao Long, very weird fight. Garbrandt got absolutely nuked to the balls. Long lost 2 different points for that nut shot. Garbrandt was throwing up. I mean, shout out to him for, continuing, but I don't know. It's just kind of been depressing to watch the later stages of Cody Garbrandt's career. And one of the stranger things is like, typically the last thing to go and potentially never goes is the power. Like you look at power punchers and even late in their careers, they can still find big shots. And if they land, it's going to be impactful. Cody Garbrandt landed 8 knockdowns in his first 6 UFC fights. He has landed 1 knockdown in his last 7. I think the big thing people talked about with Garbrandt was the chin, where they're like, oh, the chin is gone. The chin honestly looks fine. Like when he's getting knocked out, it's him just being super reckless. He hasn't been dropped in his last 5 fights, but it's just like there's nothing really there with his skill set that scares you. You know, the cardio isn't great. He still is pretty fast, like he's quick, he's got good hand speed, but it has to happen in short bursts. And then he just has no grappling upside. So it really feels like there's just no skill development in his game. And then for whatever reason, just like every physical athletic trait is just worse than when it was in his prime. On the other side here with Adrian Yanez, I was really happy to see his performance last time out. He'd kind of been riding a rough stretch. I think he was 1-3 in his last 4. I thought he got robbed against Ricky Simone. It was a draw. I thought he should have got his hand raised in that one. I thought he won the first. I thought he obviously won the third. Could have potentially been a 10-8 in that one. Like Simone was saved by the bell late in that fight. But I thought it was a really good performance. We know Adrian Yanez has super slick boxing. He can push a pace. But some of the concerns are that he was a little bit too hittable. Takedown defense, maybe kind of suspect. Also had his legs beaten up in a previous matchup. But he just looked super calculated against Ricky Simone. He was defensively responsible. He still got his volume off, but not at the expense of his own defense. And then the takedown defense was awesome too. Like Ricky Simone, legitimately good grappler, and Adrian Yanez did very well in that realm. So as you can probably tell, feel good about Yanez in this matchup. Now, you get into boxing exchanges with Cody Garbrandt. He could always land that big shot, but based on, how composed Yanez was last time out, I trust his cardio more, his volume, and he also is very dangerous, in terms of power himself. So I'm taking Yanez here. I think he gets it done by round 2 knockout. That's my pick. Then next up, we have Gable Steveson taking on Elisha Ellison. This was originally on the main card. I like that they switched it up. I think they were just kind of speed running a repeat of the Bo Nickel thing where you're just pushing a guy too soon. My kind of philosophy is if you want to push a fighter, right, you can do one of 2 things. You can put them, in big time card placements. So like, main cards of fight nights and numbered cards, or you could build them up really slowly against poor opponents. But when you combine them, it feels very disingenuous. And that's what they did with Bo Nickel. They had him on a lot of main cards against really bad opponents, and it just wasn't a good look. So the UFC's kind of switched it up here. They're giving him a not very good opponent, but you don't get to fight on the main card when you're fighting Elisha Ellison in your debut. Obviously, Gable Steveson, extremely credentialed wrestler, a gold medal in freestyle wrestling, 2 D1 national championships, obviously made, the jump over to MMA. He's 3-0 as a pro, all 3 of those wins by round 1 knockout. Last time out, honestly took on a dude that had solid experience, 11-3, Hugo Lozama, faced some adversity, ate a pretty clean spinning wheel kick, which is not something you see a lot of in the heavyweight division, but after that got him out of there, pretty quickly after. He actually does have some pretty legit pop in his hands, looks fine in the striking. He's obviously not going to look super polished at this point in his career, but it's the wrestling that's the real difference maker here, and as you could expect, he's pretty dominant in that area. On the other side with Elisha Ellison, he was knocked out in the first round in his UFC debut against Brando Pericic. Now, in hindsight, Pericic looks pretty legit, so maybe not as bad as you would have thought right when it happened. He's 5-2 as a pro, 4 wins by knockout, 1 by sub. All of those wins have come in the first round. I believe he's only entered the second round once, and that was his first pro loss, so the one before the Pericic one. I think he's honestly a decent athlete for heavyweight, but I do think he's probably going to be pretty outmatched in this one. I think Gable Steveson is like potentially the largest favorite in MMA history, which seems a little crazy considering he only has 3 pro fights, but I can also see the argument for it. So I'm going Gable Steveson, round 1 knockout. Then in the featured prelim, we have Robert Whittaker taking on Nikita Krylov. For Robert Whittaker here, a lot has changed since his last time out. I think close to a year-long layoff. He has now moved up to 205, so this is going to be his first fight in the light heavyweight division. And we kind of have to remember here, Whittaker, not just, a former middleweight, he's a former welterweight. And to be totally honest, was never all that big of a middleweight. Just look at his last fight out against Reinier de Ridder. Like, de Ridder was towering over him, looked like the much bigger guy. So now probably going to be a very, very small light heavyweight. He's 35 years old, so you might think, he has a lot of gas left in the tank, especially in the heavier weight classes. But it's fair to say he's pretty past his prime at this point. Fighters' primes and, age curves kind of go differently. Whittaker's a guy who peaked pretty early on. Like, he was fighting on The Ultimate Fighter at 21 years old. He's had 24 fights in the UFC. And against like a lot of really high level competition. He's fought Yoel Romero twice, Israel Adesanya twice, Hamza, DDP, Wonderboy, Paulo Costa, Darren Till, Jared Cannonier, Kelvin Gastelum, Jacare Souza, Derek Brunson, RDR. You can go on and on. He has fought a ton of super high level opponents in the UFC. I mean, those Yoel fights were back in was it 2016, 2017, those wars? So he's got a lot of tread on the tires here, Whittaker does. Now, in terms of his style, he's got that karate base, wide stance, pretty bouncy. He's got a really impressive jab. His 1-2 combination is nice. The 1-2 with the head kick behind it is probably his signature combination. Has had a lot of success landing that throughout his UFC career. And then also with that super bladed stance, he's got a pretty nice side kick. Can throw it to the body. Can also attack, the oblique kick, try to blow out people's knees with that technique. And then he's a pretty capable grappler when his opponents do close the distance. He doesn't wrestle offensively a ton, but he's totally fine in that area. On the other side here with Nikita Krylov, he is very much kill or be killed. He has finishes in 29 of his 31 pro wins, 13 by knockout, 16 by sub. He has been finished in 9 of his 11 losses, 3 by knockout, 6 by sub. I will say for Whittaker, Krylov isn't a super physically imposing light heavyweight. He's not one of these dudes where it's if he debuted at heavyweight, he'd probably come in at 245. I just don't think that's the case with Krylov. He's very aggressive, kind of got an awkward style overall, very squared stance. Can hurt you with a variety of different shots on the feet, the punches. He's got some sneaky head kicks, the knees. He does close distance very recklessly. We saw that in his last 2 losses against Dominic Reyes and Bogdan Guskov. He really kind of can crash in with his chin up in the air. It also doesn't help that he is pretty squared. And so I feel like he's just very easy target right in front of you. And then despite him having a lot of submission wins, he really doesn't force the grappling. He's kind of opportunistic in that way. And so I don't think Whittaker is going to have a ton of success at 205. Like I said, I do think he's pretty past his prime, but I think this matchup is pretty decent for him. I do think technically he's just going to be the way better striker. I think Krylov, despite being the bigger guy, might kind of struggle to really close the distance on Whittaker. I think he can have a lot of success landing that jab up the middle. I could even see him kind of clipping and hurting Krylov with that jab, especially if Krylov is kind of crashing in recklessly with his chin up. Whittaker just shoots into range with that jab. That could be the start of the end for Krylov. So I think Whittaker gets this one done. I'm going to take him to win it by round 2 knockout. Also just rooting for him. He's a fun fighter, has had a great career. Don't really want to see him go out on a bad note here, especially up at 205, where the consequences could be even worse. Now, jumping into the main card here, this is honestly an awesome main card. You have a really solid mix of big name fight at the top, some really high level matchups, and then the opener here is just an absolute banger. This fight is going to be fireworks. No way this thing disappoints. Bobby King Green taking on Terrence McKinney. Bobby Green is entering his prime at 39 years old. It's kind of crazy. He's on a 3-fight win streak, back-to-back master classes against Jeremy Stephens and Daniel Zellhuber. He outlanded Stephens 57-5, ended up submitting him, outlanded Zellhuber as a pretty big underdog, 86-17, finished him by knockout. And it's very strange because throughout Bobby Green's pretty much entire UFC career, he's been a decision machine in both his wins and his losses. Like, he's going to be pretty durable, but he doesn't have a lot of finishing upside. And so they're fun fights, but they're probably going to be 15-minute fights. And then all of a sudden, he gets into like his later 30s, and he's just like this blood and guts fighter who's kill or be killed. He's getting finished or he's finding a finish. It's been pretty awesome to watch, and Bobby Green stylistically is awesome to watch. He's got a very unique striking style, hands down, very reliant on his reaction time and vision. He does see things very well. I mean, if he didn't, that style would not fly, especially against UFC caliber opponents. He's got a super diverse shot selection. It is kind of awkward because these shots come from weird angles. He's also got a very squared stance, so like every weapon is available to him at any time. He works all three levels, head, body, legs, mixes it up very well. And then he likes to push a pace. He's got good cardio, averages 6.46 significant strikes per minute. Durability, a little bit of a concern. He's been knocked out 6 times in his career. 4 of his last 5 losses have come by knockout. On the other side here with Terrence McKinney, arguably the most exciting man in the UFC, coming off a 24-second knockout win against Kyle Nelson, came out hot, landed a big head kick, just followed up with a ton of ground and pound, got him out of there almost instantly. McKinney's kill or be killed. He has an even amount of knockout and submission wins in his career. In his 8 losses, he's been finished in all of them, 5 by knockout, 3 by sub. He has not seen the scorecards a single time in his professional career. And as you can probably imagine, with that type of record, he pushes a crazy high pace, comes out very hot early, and if he finds the finish, great. If he doesn't, he's probably going to fade, and he is going to get finished. Only 4 of his, I think it's 27 pro fights, or is it 26? 4 of his 26 pro fights have entered the second round. He's explosive, he's powerful, he's very aggressive, but defensively, he is pretty open. I think he's a very underrated grappler. I mean, like I said, 50% of his wins are by submission, but he's also pretty technical in the grappling. Like, he's good at racking up control time, can land some solid ground and pound. And so this does kind of feel like most Terrence McKinney fights, where it kind of feels like a coin flip. I will say, specifically in this matchup, I'm a little bit worried for Bobby Green. He does struggle against some of these more explosive strikers, and I think a guy like Bobby Green does a better job against more technical, more predictable opponents where he sees things very well. And so if he has a good idea of what's coming, that's where he's going to find a lot of success. Whereas with Terrence McKinney, I mean, he just comes out. I don't know if Terrence McKinney knows what he's going to throw when he steps in there. And so he comes out hot up top. You know, he is going to headhunt early on, and it's going to be big punches. It's going to be head kicks. It's going to be knees. And so with the hands down style, I think we're going to see McKinney find something early. Now, would I be shocked if Bobby Green shows great defense, McKinney fades, and then Green knocks him out? No. But my gut here is telling me to pick Terrence McKinney to win this one by round 1 knockout, and that is what I'm going to do. Next up, we have easily one of my favorite fights on the card. Honestly, 2 of my favorite fighters, if not my 2 favorite fighters in this weight class, Brandon Royval taking on Lonnie Kavanaugh. Royval's coming off of back-to-back losses. He had the very close, like, fight of the night loss against Joshua Van. Last time out, not great. Knocked out in the first round by Manel Kopp. That was towards the end of 2025. Might have actually been the last card of 2025. Brandon Royval has great cardio. He fights at a very high pace, really likes to pepper that jab out there, going to throw a lot of 1-2s, a variety of different kicks, will mix in the knees, the elbows. I think, you know, his pace and cardio is his biggest strength, but I also think it's one of his bigger weaknesses, where I think he just throws too much volume. He's got a pretty long, rangy frame for the weight class, and he just doesn't really optimize it. I think we saw that a lot in the Joshua Van fight, where Van's the guy who should have to crash into range, but Royval was the guy that was kind of serving his chin up on a platter because he's overextending into Joshua Van's range, which doesn't make a lot of sense. Joshua Van ends up using that like oblique sidekick thing against Royval, which should not happen. Like, Royval should be able to use that against Joshua Van, not the other way around, just given their frames. But because Royval was crashing in so recklessly, that's a weapon that Van went to kind of get him off of him a little bit. I think Royval has kind of underutilized grappling. More than half of his pro wins are by submission, but he averages 0.65 takedowns per 15 minutes, despite landing them at a 75% clip. So he's very much just like an opportunistic grappler within the UFC. Now, on the other side here with Lonnie Kavanaugh, I am extremely high on him. He's coming off just an absolute masterclass against Brandon Moreno. And it's kind of miraculous when you look at his last two fights. He went from gassing out and getting knocked out by Charles Johnson in the second round to taking a short notice main event against Brandon Moreno and just pretty much dominating him over 5 rounds. The cardio looked great, did it at elevation. It's just an insane turnaround, both in terms of like result, quality of competition, but also just the overall skill set. The specific improvement in like the gas tank area is pretty wild. Kavanaugh is an elite striker. I talk about this in a lot of my videos, but you kind of have your moving strikers, your movers, like a Corey Sandhagen type, always on your bike, super tough to track down. And then you have your more grounded strikers. Ilya Topuria is the example I like to use for that. I think the best fighters combine both of those, where you are pretty elusive, you've got good footwork, but you can also sit down on your shots and, really have fight-ending consequences. That is Lonnie Kavanaugh. He might be like the single best example of a guy who combines both of those things. He is very quick, he's got good footwork, but man, when he sits down on his shots, he is very explosive. He hits very hard. He does such a great job of darting in and out of range. He is a knockout on, I think it must have been in Cage Warriors. I want to actually get the name. It's one of like the cleanest knockouts you'll see, where he just darts in and out of range like 3 different times, ends up just putting this dude out cold in that matchup. And I mean, you saw it against Brandon Moreno, like just an extremely incredible performance. He has such elite shot selection. All right, what matchup was it? Might have been Ryan Morgan. I think that could have been the matchup. He also had the nasty spinning heel kick, knocked out his opponent on a Contender Series, out cold. Just legit fight-ending consequences with Lonnie Kavanaugh. He works all 3 levels, great counters, throws very well in combination, also has some really nice kicks, can beat up the legs, especially as someone who's kind of on the shorter side of this weight class. I think he's 5'4". The fact that he is so effective with his kicks is pretty impressive. And then his takedown defense has been on point so far in the UFC, 94%, and also not afraid to mix it up and shoot his own takedowns. So honestly, I think this is kind of a tough matchup for Brandon Royval. If Kavanaugh isn't going to wilt and fade in the cardio department, I just think Kavanaugh is going to be the way more technical striker. I think he's going to hit much harder. And I think Royval is going to have a tough time getting his volume off. So I am going to take Lonnie Kavanaugh in this matchup, and I think he could find a finish. I'm going to take him to win this one by round 2 knockout. I think he's less than a 2-1 favorite. I feel a little bit better about him in this spot. I know he's got minimal experience against top competition, and maybe I'm leaning too far into that most recent performance and just ignoring the Charles Johnson fight, but man, he just looked so awesome in that one. I think if the same dude shows up to fight Brandon Royval, I think it's going to be a rough night for Royval. This is one of those matchups where like I want both dudes to win, so kind of tough, but I'm riding with Kavanaugh. Then we get to the Corey Sandhagen Mario Bautista matchup here at 135. I honestly feel like one of the best measures of how good a main card is going to be is how light are the fights. So with the heaviest fight on this main card is 155. You've got 2 lightweight fights. You've got a flyweight fight, and then, 3 lightweight fights, a flyweight fight, and a bantamweight fight. That's how you know it's going to be entertaining. And so Corey Sandhagen, Mario Bautista, this is a super high-level matchup. 2 guys who are very skilled, very well-rounded. I'm a big fan of Corey Sandhagen. I think he's a really smart, technical fighter, really good footwork on the feet, constant movement, really tough to track down and hit clean. I know maybe you shouldn't say that after he almost got finished by Merab, but like we've only really seen him get cracked and hurt badly twice in the UFC. One was his last time out against Merab, and then the other one was Petr Yan. The Yan one, obviously, very understandable. He flows through his combinations super well. I think he's talked about this. Maybe it was on his YouTube channel, maybe an interview, but he's kind of worked on being more intentional with his footwork, where he's not just always trying to be moving just to move, but he wants to, I think he wants to plant a little bit more, just be a little bit more efficient and mindful of his movement. So I still expect him to be on his bike, but just maybe with more intentionality. And then he is willing to mix it up. One of the things I really respect about Corey Sandhagen is that despite being a very good striker, he's not making the bet in his career that he's just going to be the best striker and destroy everyone on the feet at 135. He wants to round out his skill sets, and we've seen that in his last 3 wins. 12 total takedowns against Figgy, Cheeto, and Rob Font. Pretty much won all 3 of those matchups in the grappling, which is not something you would have thought would have been the case 4 or 5 years ago, when he's getting choked out by Aljamain Sterling. He has shown some solid takedown defense and get-up ability pretty much outside of the Merab and Umar fights. The same thing can kind of apply to Bautista, who's had decent takedown defense until he goes up against Umar. I think my main critique of Corey Sandhagen and his current style is that he's not someone who's super physically gifted as this super dangerous, explosive, powerful athlete. And so I don't like the fact that he has kind of moved away from some of his higher upside strikes, right? There was a stretch in the UFC where he had 3 wins, all knockouts against Marlon Moraes, that was the wheel kick, Frankie Edgar, that was the flying knee, and then Song Yadong was a cut, but still that was off of an elbow. And so he was throwing more of these big potential fight-ending shots. And it seems like he's gotten a little bit too obsessed with being completely perfect. And it's just tough to do that against some of the best guys in the world, especially when they might be superior athletes. They might hit harder. They might be on a different level in terms of the grappling. Even the Dillashaw fight that he loses probably should have won. He landed some huge shots in that matchup. I think he landed a flying knee. I want to say maybe he landed a spinning back fist, something like that. And so I would like to see a little bit more of those big moments. Just the idea that you could end a fight at any point, or just pick up a huge moment to stamp around. I think that would really help him with his current game. Now, on the other side with Mario Bautista, he is coming off a main event win against Vinicius Oliveira. Really dominant performance, went to the grappling, 5 takedowns, 6 minutes of control time, ended up submitting Oliveira in the second round. Bautista's a pretty high volume striker, 5.3 strikes per minute, or significant strikes per minute. Good footwork, very technical, straight shots, doesn't overextend. Like I mentioned, takedown defense was totally fine until he had to fight and got controlled by Umar. I think this is going to be a competitive matchup here. I think both guys kind of lack that top tier finishing upside. Fully expect this one to go the distance. I think on the feet, Corey Sandhagen's a little bit more dynamic. I think he's a little bit more diverse in his shot selection. And so I do lean Corey on the feet. I think it'll be interesting to see if either or both of these guys look to grapple in this one. I think that could, help these guys out close round, get a takedown, land some ground and pound. I'm just going to lean towards Corey Sandhagen. I think he's just kind of slightly better everywhere. And so I'll take him to win this one by decision. Now we have arrived at the co-main event, and I will say I've posted a full breakdown on this matchup. I think it's 20-ish minutes breaking down this BSD Paddy Pimblett fight. So if you want the in-depth breakdown, that is up on the channel. I appreciate you guys viewing the breakdowns. The McGregor Holloway one probably is going to be my most viewed video. So I appreciate you guys if you have seen it. If you haven't, the people seem to like them. So check them out. But starting off here with BSD, riding a 4-fight finish streak, last 3 wins against Rufi, Dariush, Dan Hooker. Benoit's got a super aggressive style, both in the striking and the grappling. I do give him the pretty clear striking edge in this one. He's a southpaw, really good kicks, is just going to rip that left kick up top to the body, to the legs. He'll go shin to shin in open stance matchups. He does not care, always wants to be pressing forward. Benoit is super dangerous in the clinch, but can also be pretty reckless and hittable. Don't know if that's an area where Paddy is really going to punish him. I think Paddy kind of falls apart once you get in his grill, like we saw against Justin Gaethje. Benoit's a high volume wrestler, but does tend to leave his neck exposed in those exchanges. When he shoots, his head is just way over his hips, tends to kind of hang out in bad spots. There are going to be some openings for front chokes in this matchup. We also saw it against Dan Hooker in that fight. Dustin Poirier also jumped guillotine like a million times in that matchup. He wasn't just doing, well, he was kind of doing it for fun, but he also was doing it because he thought he could land those in that matchup. When Benoit does get on top, he's got some solid ground and pound. Also, honestly, some pretty solid submission skills. I do think he can be a little bit overzealous and potentially give up position when in some of these higher level matchups, you might want to just value the position a little bit more because you're just not going to be able to unload as much as you might have been against lower level opponents. On the other side here with Paddy Pimblett, coming off that decision interim title loss against Justin Gaethje, I'm super low on his striking. Technically speaking, it's pretty rough. Doesn't really get into his base. His energy transfer on his punches is all over the place. His chin is just way up in the air. And then he does just allow opponents to close distance on him, which is something he should really be trying to mitigate. I think if he even developed like that DDP, spamming that knee up the middle, I think that would be huge for his striking game. But he is durable. He's tough. He's got some solid kicks. If he can stay at range, he can beat up the legs. Knees, also is a pretty impressive uppercut that he landed a few times against Gaethje. Where Paddy really thrives is the grappling. He's kind of limited as a wrestler, but his submission skills really are top tier. Also very good control grappling if he can get to the back. And so I think Benoit Saint Denis is probably the better fighter. I think he's definitely the better striker in this matchup. And if I knew that his game plan was just to go out, get in Paddy's grill, use the dirty boxing, get in the clinch, work the body, land the elbows, and keep it standing, I would easily pick him in this matchup. Unfortunately, I think he's kind of programmed to be this well-rounded fighter, mix the martial arts. I think he's going to look to wrestle in this matchup, along with the striking, obviously. And I think Paddy's going to catch him. I think he's just too dangerous. You look at the way he jumped guillotine against Bobby Green, transitioned into the triangle armbar. He can take advantage of grappling mistakes that Benoit makes. Even if he gets Paddy down, I think he might lose top position, could give up his back. We know Paddy's great with the body triangle. We saw him lock in Jordan Levitt's arm, find the rear naked choke that way. So I think Paddy's going to look kind of rough on the feet. Think he's going to get beat up a little bit. Think he ends up finding an opportunistic submission and wins this one. I'll go first round sub. It just seems like if you're submitting someone, probably more likely to do it, when you're fresher and they're pretty dry. So Paddy round one sub is going to be my choice. We have finally arrived at the main event here. Probably the most highly anticipated fight of the year. Conor McGregor taking on Max Holloway. Once again, have a full breakdown posted. Appreciate all the people who have already watched it. For Conor McGregor, I think we just have to start off with all the questions surrounding this matchup. 5-year layoff, coming off an injury. It's up at 170, which is, not what his last couple of fights have been. And then just how focused has he been? He clearly has not been locked in for the full 5 years. When's been the point where he's really locked in? What percentage of time over that last, 5 years has he been really focused on evolving or even just maintaining as an MMA fighter? And then there's also questions on what kind of striking style is he going to employ? Is it going to be the featherweight, karate style? Is it going to be the boxing style we saw against Poirier? Is it going to be more of the hybrid we saw against Eddie Alvarez? Who really knows? I think probably the hybrid is the best choice, but someone actually commented this. They were just kind of expanding on what I was talking about with the stances. And it was like, my response was basically, it's kind of crazy because we just don't know. Conor could have been fine-tuning that boxing stance from the first or the second Poirier fight for the last 5 years. He also could have just thrown it completely in the trash after he got knocked out in that matchup. we really just don't know. Regardless of the specific style that Conor's going to implement on the feet, he's always going to be a dangerous striker. He's going to have good distance management. He's going to be pretty precise. Obviously, that left hand is his, number one weapon. But once again, I just come back to all the question marks, right? And I think the 5-year layoff has to be a negative. I think some people aren't realizing, like, Conor's prime was 10 years ago. He hasn't won a fight in 6 years. And some people have, commented like, oh, it's Conor, he's going to look great no matter what. And it's like, I guess he had a shorter layoff against Poirier and lost back-to-back fights. Like, he couldn't come back from a layoff and just outclass a top-tier opponent, in Dustin Poirier. Is he going to be able to do it against Max Holloway? Also, the injury, just the ring rust factor, and not even that he's just going to look bad, but I also think even in like the Poirier matchup, right, the rematch, he's eaten the leg kick, and he just didn't have a lot of recent experience in there, and he didn't know how to deal with it. What's to say Max Holloway isn't going to have some interesting wrinkle in this one that Conor's just going to struggle to adjust to? One thing that I saw people commenting on my full breakdown that I think is kind of interesting to me, the 170 factor. And my kind of case, and I don't necessarily disagree with this now, but I don't think Conor at 170 is this like amazing thing, because Conor's never been someone who's just had this crazy raw power. His power has come from his timing and his precision, and I think he is less precise, and I think he's like less quick, and the timing's not as great when he's up at 170, because he's more muscle bound. And so, yeah, he's going to hit hard. He's hurting Nate Diaz on the feet in those matchups, but it's not like he just obtains like the touch of death when he moves up to 170. The counter that I did see is like, if he's kind of been on, whatever juice he's been on, coming back from, the ankle break and being out of the, USADA or whatever the new testing system is, it's possible like he's really, really filled out as like a legit 170, which maybe I could see the advantage there, but I think the point kind of still applies where it's like, I just don't think that's his optimal weight class. Like, I think he's best being this long, rangy, lean fighter, either at 145 or at 155. So those are my thoughts on Conor. Now looking at Max Holloway, coming off the Charles Oliveira loss, I think this Oliveira loss has kind of made people underrate Holloway a little bit, at least specifically in this matchup, where it's like, if he was just coming off the Dustin win, I think people would not think this fight would be super competitive, because he looked pretty good in that Dustin fight. But this matchup where Oliveira just dominates him in the grappling, to me, is pretty irrelevant here. I've seen some people reference like, oh, Conor wrestled Holloway in their first matchup, and that's not false. Like, Conor did take him down 4 times in the first matchup, but Max Holloway was like 21 years old? And I'm telling you guys, if Conor McGregor tries to wrestle in this matchup, I don't think he will, but some people think he can have success there. If he tries to wrestle, that man is going to be gasping for breath going into the 3rd round. He just does not have the cardio base to completely switch up his style. The cardio's never been amazing. And if all of a sudden he's shifting from like striking cardio to grappling cardio, I think he's going to gas himself out. So I don't think the grappling is going to be a huge factor here. I do think Holloway is going to be the smaller fighter, right? He fought at 145 like 2 years ago, maybe within the last 2 years. So this is going to be his first fight up at 170. McGregor's had a few fights up there, has seemingly been in that frame for at least a few years now. But I think Holloway's striking translated pretty well to 155. He still had the speed. He was still able to be super high volume against Justin Gaethje and Dustin Poirier, but had a little bit more danger factor, hit a little bit harder. Now, the chin's been touched, right? This is no longer like the granite Max Holloway chin at 145, where he can just walk down Jose Aldo, eat every single one of his shots, and break him down that way. He was knocked out by Ilya, dropped by Gaethje, dropped by Dustin, but his recoverability has still been pretty good. And even after, getting just completely knocked out by Ilya, like, the chin still held in there against some very powerful punchers. So I think Holloway's going to come in, think he's going to have his usual dynamic striking style, and I just can't ignore all the red flags here with Conor. I will say, the betting odds are really moving, not in favor of McGregor being the favorite, but he was going from like a 4-1 dog now to like 2-1. I think that's a little bit excessive. I will say I've seen some of the interviews and I can see why people are buying into the hype. A small part of me is like, oh my gosh, what if he does it? Like, he sounds like he's locked in, but I don't know. I just don't think I could ignore all these factors. Got to go with, what we have here. And yeah, I think Conor could win this fight, right? He's super dangerous. He's a great striker. If he's motivated, he can hang in there with most dudes, but such a long layoff. He's 37, 10 years removed from his prime. Max Holloway's been fighting the best of the best since he's been out and having a lot of success. So I'm taking Max Holloway. I think the first couple of rounds could be competitive. I think Holloway pulls away, ends up finishing him by knockout in round 3. That is my pick. Those are all my picks, my full card predictions. I think this is my longest single card prediction video, but it's worth it because this is an awesome card. Hopefully it delivers, but let me know your guys' thoughts. Drop your picks in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one.